The strongest men don't always survive because they're powerful. Sometimes they survive because a child decides they should. I never believed kindness could change destiny until the night my daughter gave away the one thing keeping her alive. My name is Grace Walker, and at 27, I spent my days cleaning a mansion so large that I could vacuum for an hour without seeing the same hallway twice. By the time my shift ended that Friday, my back ached, my sneakers were soaked from scrubbing marble floors, and all I wanted was to get my 3-year-old daughter home before the weather turned worse. Lily skipped beside me with one hand wrapped around my fingers and the other clutching the tiny blue inhaler her pediatrician insisted she never leave behind. Asthma had become part of our daily routine. Every cough made my heart race. Every playground visit meant watching the pollen count. Every month, I wondered how many extra hours I would have to work just to keep paying for prescriptions that seemed to disappear faster than my paycheck. The bus had broken down 3 blocks earlier, forcing us to walk through cold autumn air that smelled like rain and fallen leaves. Lily wore a faded yellow jacket that had once belonged to my neighbor's daughter. It was too big for her, making her look even smaller as she hummed softly beside me. "Mommy," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "Can we get hot chocolate when we get home?" I smiled despite the exhaustion pressing against my shoulders. "If we still have marshmallows." She giggled like I'd promised her Disneyland instead of a $5 treat. We turned onto a quieter street lined with old brick buildings and empty storefronts preparing to close for the evening. That's when I saw him. A man in a perfectly tailored black overcoat leaned heavily against a dark SUV parked near the curb. Even from across the street, something felt wrong. His breathing came in shallow, uneven gasps. One hand gripped the side mirror while the other searched every pocket of his coat with growing urgency. His face had lost nearly all its color. He looked like someone fighting desperately for air. 2 expensive vehicles screeched around the corner several blocks away, but they were still too far to reach him. He tried taking another breath, stumbled once, then slowly slid onto one knee. Every instinct told me to keep walking. A single mother doesn't stop for strangers in deserted streets. We survive by avoiding trouble, not stepping into it. But before I could tighten my grip on Lily's hand, she gently pulled away. "Baby, wait," I called softly. She ignored me for the first time in her little life. Her tiny boots tapped against the sidewalk as she hurried toward the struggling stranger with complete innocence. I felt panic surge through me, already moving after her, afraid of what might happen. Instead of fear, Lily looked up at the man with quiet concern. "You can't breathe," she said in the simple voice only children possess. The man barely lifted his eyes toward her, unable to answer. Lily looked down at the inhaler in her small hand. She hesitated for only a heartbeat before placing it into his trembling fingers. "Here," she whispered with a smile that could soften any storm. "Mine helps me. Maybe it'll help you too." The man stared at the little blue inhaler resting in his hand, as though it had appeared by miracle instead of from the fingers of a 3-year-old child. His chest rose sharply once, then again, before he managed to use it. I watched his shoulders slowly relax as air finally returned to his lungs. Color crept back into his face one careful breath at a time. Relief flooded through me so suddenly that my knees almost gave out. Lily simply smiled, completely unaware that she had just handed away the one medication we could not afford to replace until my next paycheck. I hurried to her side and gently pulled her behind me. "I am so sorry," I said, embarrassed by the situation even though I had done nothing wrong. She only wanted to help. The stranger looked at me for several long seconds. His eyes were an unusual shade of gray, calm but intense, the kind that seemed to notice everything without saying much at all. He opened his mouth to speak, but before a single word came out, 3 black SUVs stopped along the curb almost simultaneously. Men wearing dark suits stepped out with astonishing speed. Their expressions shifted from alarm to visible relief the moment they saw the stranger standing again. One of them hurried forward. "Sir, we have been searching everywhere for you." Another immediately offered a fresh medical kit while speaking into an earpiece. The entire street changed in an instant. What had been an ordinary sidewalk now felt like the center of something far beyond my understanding. Lily peeked around my leg, her curious blue eyes fixed on the stranger. "See," she whispered proudly. "It worked." For the first time since I had noticed him, the man smiled. It was small, almost uncertain, as though smiling had become unfamiliar. He crouched carefully until he was closer to Lily's height. "It did," he answered quietly. "Thank you." His voice was deep but gentle, carrying the calm confidence of someone accustomed to being heard. He reached inside his coat and removed a leather wallet. Without hesitation, he pulled out several crisp $100 bills. "Please," he said, extending them toward me. "Replace her medicine. Buy whatever she needs." I immediately shook my head. "No, she did not help you for money." One of the suited men looked genuinely shocked. Another frowned, almost unable to believe anyone would refuse such an offer. The stranger studied my face again, as if searching for a reason behind my answer. "You cannot even replace the inhaler she gave me," he said softly. "Allow me to fix that." I folded Lily's tiny fingers into my own. My daughter was taught that helping someone is not a business transaction. If you are breathing again, that is enough. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The city noises returned around us. Distant traffic, a barking dog somewhere across the street, leaves scraping across the sidewalk in the cool evening breeze. The stranger slowly lowered the money without taking his eyes off me. "What is your name?" he asked. "Grace." He nodded once, committing it to memory. "And hers?" Lily answered before I could. "I am Lily." Another faint smile crossed his face. "Lily," he repeated quietly. "I will not forget either of you." Before I could respond, one of the suited men leaned close and whispered something into his ear. The stranger glanced toward the waiting vehicles, then back at us one final time. He gave a slight nod that felt strangely personal before stepping into the waiting SUV. As the convoy disappeared into evening traffic, I looked down at Lily's empty hands. She no longer had the inhaler she depended on every day. She only looked up at me with complete peace and asked, "Mommy, do you think he is going to be okay now?" I forced a smile, brushing a loose strand of blonde hair from her forehead, while silently praying we would both still be asking that same question if her asthma returned before I could somehow afford another inhaler. Sleep did not come easily that night. Every few minutes, I found myself walking into Lily's room just to listen to her breathing. The empty space where her emergency inhaler usually rested on the nightstand made my stomach tighten every single time I looked at it. She slept peacefully, one tiny hand wrapped around her stuffed rabbit, completely convinced she had done the right thing. Maybe she had. I just prayed life would be kind enough not to punish her generosity. The next morning began the way most mornings did. Coffee made from the cheapest brand at the grocery store. Peanut butter toast cut into little squares because Lily insisted it tasted better that way. Then we caught the city bus across town to the estate where I worked. The mansion looked just as intimidating as always, hidden behind towering iron gates and rows of perfectly trimmed hedges that probably cost more to maintain than my yearly rent. I kissed Lily on the forehead before dropping her off at the small daycare room reserved for employees' children. "Be good," I whispered. She smiled. "Always." I laughed softly because she genuinely believed that. Inside the mansion, everything moved with practiced precision. Housekeepers polished crystal chandeliers until they sparkled. Gardeners trimmed flowers that somehow bloomed even in late autumn. Chefs prepared meals that looked like magazine covers. I spent the morning dusting bookshelves in the West Library, trying not to think about the pharmacy receipt folded inside my apron pocket. The replacement inhaler would cost almost $120 after insurance. I had $83 in my checking account until payday. I kept telling myself Lily would be fine for a few days. She almost never needed it twice in 1 week. Almost. Around noon, the estate manager called everyone into the main foyer without explanation. Nearly 20 employees stood quietly as she adjusted her glasses and cleared her throat. "The owner of this estate will be arriving unexpectedly this afternoon," she announced. "Everything must be absolutely perfect." A quiet murmur spread through the room. I had worked there for nearly 8 months and had never met the owner. According to the other staff members, he rarely visited, preferring to travel between business meetings in different cities. Some believed he owned hotels. Others insisted he invested in shipping companies. Nobody seemed to know for certain. What everyone did know was that people listened when he spoke. I returned to polishing the grand staircase, thinking little about it until the sound of engines echoed through the circular driveway several hours later. Black luxury vehicles rolled through the front gates one after another. Security personnel stepped out first, scanning the property with calm efficiency before opening the rear passenger door. My hands froze around the polishing cloth. The man who stepped onto the stone driveway was the same stranger Lily had saved less than 24 hours earlier. The tailored charcoal suit had replaced yesterday's overcoat, but there was no mistaking those steady gray eyes. He paused halfway up the staircase. For a brief second, our eyes met across the enormous entrance hall. Recognition flickered across his face immediately. Mine too. Around me, every employee lowered their head respectfully. I remained completely still, unable to process the impossible coincidence unfolding in front of me. Then his gaze drifted beyond me toward the hallway leading to the daycare room where Lily was quietly coloring pictures, and something thoughtful settled into his expression, as though he had just discovered that yesterday's chance encounter had been far more personal than either of us could have imagined. The rest of the afternoon passed in complete silence, but I could feel his presence long after he disappeared into the private wing of the estate. Every employee moved more carefully than usual, speaking in whispers and checking every polished surface twice. I tried convincing myself that yesterday had been nothing more than an unusual coincidence. He was the owner. I was one of dozens of housekeepers. Our worlds had crossed for a few minutes on a sidewalk, and now they would quietly separate again. That was the logical ending. Life, however, rarely cared about logic. Near the end of my shift, the estate manager approached me while I was folding fresh towels in the laundry room. "Grace," she said, her voice unusually soft. "The owner has requested to speak with you." My hand stopped moving. "Me?" She nodded once. Immediately, my heart pounded all the way across the mansion. The corridors felt longer than they ever had before. Family portraits watched from polished walls while afternoon sunlight poured through enormous windows, making everything appear almost unreal. When I reached the private study, one of the security officers opened the heavy wooden door without saying a word. He was standing beside the fireplace, his suit perfectly tailored, one hand resting casually inside his pocket as he looked out toward the gardens. Without turning around, he said quietly, "Thank you for coming, Grace." I remained near the doorway. "You wanted to see me, sir?" He turned slowly. In daylight, his face appeared calmer than it had on the sidewalk, though there was still a trace of exhaustion beneath his eyes. "Yesterday, I did not introduce myself." He extended his hand politely. "My name is Adrian Moretti." I accepted the handshake cautiously. His grip was firm but respectful. "I know who you are now." A faint smile crossed his face. "Most people do." An awkward silence settled between us before he reached toward the large desk and picked up a small white pharmacy bag. He held it out to me. "Your daughter should not have to go without this because she chose to help someone." I immediately recognized the label before I even touched it. It was the exact inhaler Lily used. Brand new. Still sealed. My throat tightened. "I cannot accept this." Adrian did not pull his hand back. "Why?" "Because Lily gave hers freely. If I accept gifts afterward, it changes why she helped you." He studied me for several quiet moments. "Does replacing something essential count as a gift?" I looked down at the pharmacy bag again. My mind raced through unpaid bills, grocery receipts, and the growing fear I had tried hiding since yesterday. Before I could answer, Adrian continued, speaking in the same calm voice. "Your daughter showed extraordinary kindness. I am simply making certain kindness does not cost her health." The words settled heavily inside me because they carried no pride, no obligation, and no hidden condition. They sounded sincere. Slowly, I accepted the bag with both hands. "Thank you," I whispered. "She will never know where it came from." Adrian nodded once. "Good. That surprised me. You do not want credit?" His expression softened almost imperceptibly. Kindness loses something when it expects applause. Before I could respond, cheerful footsteps echoed through the hallway. A tiny voice called out excitedly, "Mommy!" Lily burst into the room holding a crayon drawing she had made at daycare. She stopped the instant she recognized Adrian. Her face lit up with complete delight. "It is you," she exclaimed before running straight toward him. Every security officer around us instinctively stiffened, but Adrian quietly raised one hand, stopping them without a single word. Lily stood in front of him, proudly holding up her drawing. "See? I made you a picture because now you can breathe again." Adrian accepted the drawing with a care that made it seem more valuable than any document on the desk behind him. It was nothing more than crayons on construction paper, a bright yellow sun, a smiling little girl, and a tall stick figure with dark hair standing beneath a blue sky. Across the top, Lily had written the letters she knew by herself, while her teacher had helped with the rest. The message read, "I hope you always breathe happy." Adrian looked at the picture for several long seconds before folding it with remarkable precision and placing it inside the inner pocket of his suit jacket. "I will keep this," he said quietly. Lily beamed with pride. "Forever?" she asked. "Forever," he answered without hesitation. Watching the exchange left me strangely unsettled. The man standing in front of us was one of the wealthiest and most influential people I had ever met, yet the thing that seemed to matter most to him at that moment cost nothing at all. I thanked him again for replacing Lily's inhaler, gathered my daughter, and headed toward the employee parking lot. Before we reached the exit, the estate manager hurried after us carrying a small envelope. "Grace," she called. "Human Resources asked me to give you this before you leave." Confused, I opened it beside my aging sedan. Inside was a notice stating that my hourly wage had been increased immediately, along with expanded health insurance benefits for dependent children. I stared at the paper, convinced there had been some mistake. "This cannot be right," I whispered. The manager smiled warmly. "The owner reviewed compensation for several employees this afternoon. Apparently, he believes loyalty should be rewarded before people ask for help." I looked back toward the mansion where the lights had already begun glowing against the darkening sky. Adrian's office windows reflected the sunset, revealing nothing about the man inside. During the drive home, Lily chattered happily about crayons, cookies, and the butterflies she hoped would return in spring. She never mentioned the inhaler or the drawing again because, to her, helping someone had already become yesterday's story. Children had a beautiful way of letting goodness remain simple. The following week brought changes that were impossible to ignore. Fresh groceries began appearing in the employee break room every Monday with a handwritten sign encouraging staff members to take whatever their families needed. The daycare received new books, safer playground equipment, and air purifiers installed in every classroom. Several older employees quietly mentioned that overdue medical bills had somehow disappeared after anonymous payments arrived at local clinics. Nobody knew who was responsible, but everyone had their own theory. I kept mine to myself. One rainy afternoon, while polishing windows overlooking the back gardens, I noticed Adrian walking alone beneath a covered stone walkway. He stopped near the greenhouse where Lily and the other children were planting flowers with their teacher. Instead of interrupting them, he remained several yards away, simply watching. Lily noticed him first. She waved enthusiastically with dirt covering both little hands. Adrian returned the wave with the smallest lift of his fingers. It lasted only a second, but I saw something I had not recognized before. The guarded distance in his expression softened whenever he looked at her. It was not obligation. It was not gratitude anymore. It was something quieter, something almost protective. As I turned back toward the window, two senior staff members passed behind me speaking in hushed voices. "Have you heard?" one whispered. "Mr. Moretti has ordered a complete background review on someone." "Who?" the other asked. The answer came so softly I almost missed it. "The housekeeper named Grace Walker and her daughter." My hands froze against the glass as 1,000 questions rushed through my mind. I did not know whether to feel honored, frightened, or both. For the next several days, I carried the weight of those whispered words everywhere I went. Every time my phone buzzed, I wondered if it was bad news. Every time someone called my name at work, I expected to be told I had made some terrible mistake. Instead, life continued with an almost suspicious calm. I cleaned bedrooms larger than my entire apartment, polished silver that reflected my tired face, and hurried home every evening to help Lily practice the alphabet before bedtime. Yet I could not ignore the feeling that invisible eyes were quietly making certain nothing happened to us. One afternoon, Lily's daycare teacher met me at the entrance with a puzzled expression. "Grace," she said, "did you arrange for a pediatric asthma specialist to visit today?" I stared at her. "No." She handed me a folder containing a complete respiratory evaluation, updated treatment recommendations, and an appointment schedule at one of the best children's hospitals in the state. Every consultation had already been paid in full. There was no company logo, no sponsor, only a small card inside the folder. It contained a single sentence written in neat handwriting. "Every child deserves an easy breath." There was no signature. There did not need to be one. That evening, I found myself standing outside Adrian's office after everyone else had gone home. I had rehearsed a dozen speeches during the elevator ride, but the moment he looked up from his desk, every carefully chosen word disappeared. He closed the file he had been reading and motioned toward the chair across from him. "Please sit." I remained standing. "Was it you?" His expression stayed calm. "Which part?" "The specialist. The medical appointments. The daycare improvements. The groceries. The insurance. The raises." For several seconds he said nothing. Then he folded his hands together. "Would it upset you if I answered yes?" I sighed quietly. It would make me wonder why. Adrian looked toward the rain sliding down the tall windows before speaking. "Because I have spent most of my life surrounded by people who calculated value in numbers. Your daughter reminded me that the greatest things cannot be purchased. She expected nothing after saving a complete stranger." I lowered my eyes, unable to answer immediately. He continued in the same measured voice. "I am not repaying a debt, Grace. A debt ends after one payment. This is something different." Before I could ask what he meant, a small knock interrupted us. The door opened just enough for Lily to peek inside. One of the daycare staff members smiled apologetically behind her. "She insisted she wanted to show you both something." Lily hurried into the office carrying a children's picture book. "Mr. Adrian," she asked hopefully, "will you read with me?" I almost apologized for the interruption, but Adrian surprised me again. Without checking his watch or glancing toward the stack of waiting documents, he stood, walked around the desk, and sat beside Lily on the large sofa. She climbed up next to him as naturally as if they had known each other for years. He opened the book carefully, sounding out every sentence with unexpected patience while Lily corrected him whenever he skipped a funny voice for one of the animal characters. I watched from across the room, hardly recognizing the man everyone else described as untouchable. His smile came more easily now. His shoulders no longer looked as heavy. When the story ended, Lily leaned against his arm and whispered, "You laugh more than before." Adrian became very still. Then he quietly answered with complete honesty, "That is because you gave me more than air that day, Lily. You reminded me how it feels to breathe like a human being again." The first real sign that something had changed arrived on a quiet Thursday morning. The estate felt unusually still, as though everyone had agreed to whisper without ever discussing it. I was arranging fresh flowers in the east hallway when the head of security approached Adrian and handed him a sealed folder. He barely glanced at it before asking a single question. "Is the information verified?" The man nodded once. Adrian dismissed him and walked toward the library without opening the folder. I tried not to pay attention, but curiosity lingered in the back of my mind for the rest of the day. Later that afternoon, while Lily was coloring pictures beside the greenhouse, Adrian found me organizing shelves in the estate's private reading room. He held the same folder in one hand. "May I ask you something personal?" he said. I hesitated before nodding. "Of course." He remained silent for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Why did you never tell anyone how difficult things had become for you?" I looked down at the stack of books in my hands. "Because everyone has problems. Mine are not special." Adrian slowly opened the folder. "According to this report, you have worked 2 jobs for almost 4 years. You sold your engagement ring to pay Lily's hospital bill. You have never missed a rent payment, even if it meant skipping meals yourself. You volunteer at the community food pantry twice every month. You have received 3 offers for financial assistance and quietly redirected every one of them to families you believed needed it more." My cheeks grew warm with embarrassment. "You investigated me." His expression held no apology, only honesty. "I needed to know whether your kindness on that sidewalk was real or simply a fortunate moment." I folded my arms. "And?" Adrian closed the folder. "I discovered something I did not expect." I waited. His gray eyes met mine with unusual sincerity. The little girl did not learn compassion by accident. She learned it by watching her mother every single day. I could not find words. No compliment had ever carried that much weight. Before either of us could say anything else, laughter echoed from the garden outside. Lily had convinced several gardeners to help her build a tiny birdhouse from leftover pieces of wood. Adrian watched through the window as she proudly hammered tiny nails with a toy-sized rubber mallet, while the adults pretended she was the foreman giving instructions. A quiet smile appeared on his face again. "Do you know what surprises me most?" he asked. I shook my head. "She trusts everyone until they give her a reason not to." I looked toward my daughter. I hope she keeps that part of herself for as long as possible. Adrian answered almost in a whisper. Then I will do everything I can to make sure the world deserves that trust. At that exact moment, Lily turned toward the window and waved excitedly for us to come outside. Adrian did not hesitate. He removed his suit jacket, rolled up the sleeves of his white shirt, and walked into the garden. Every employee nearby stopped what they were doing, staring in disbelief as the owner of the estate knelt beside a 3-year-old child, patiently holding tiny wooden boards while she proudly announced where each piece belonged. I watched from the doorway, realizing the investigation had not uncovered a secret about me at all. The greatest discovery Adrian Moretti had made was that the smallest acts of love could quietly rebuild a heart that years of wealth, influence, and success had never been able to repair. Autumn slowly gave way to winter, and somewhere along the changing season, the mansion no longer felt like a place where I simply worked. It became a place where Lily laughed without worrying. Whether she would be told to stay quiet, where the kitchen staff always saved an extra cinnamon roll for her breakfast, and where even the gardeners competed to see who could make her smile first. Adrian never encouraged any of it with grand speeches. He simply noticed people. If an employee looked tired, he quietly adjusted schedules. If someone's child needed school supplies, they somehow appeared before the next semester began. Nobody announced these changes. They simply happened, one thoughtful decision at a time. One snowy afternoon, Lily insisted on building the smallest snowman in the estate garden. The snow barely reached her little boots, but she worked with complete determination, packing handfuls together while Adrian stood nearby, pretending not to supervise. "It needs a nose," Lily declared. Adrian glanced around before picking up a tiny carrot from the kitchen basket someone had left on the patio. Lily laughed as she pressed it into place. "Now he can smell cookies." Adrian actually laughed out loud, a deep, genuine sound that caused several employees to glance toward the garden in surprise. I had never heard him laugh like that before. As we walked back inside, Lily suddenly stopped near the front entrance and began coughing. My heart immediately tightened. It lasted only a few seconds before she reached into her little coat pocket, removed her new inhaler, and calmly followed her doctor's instructions. Within moments, her breathing settled again. I knelt beside her, brushing loose strands of blonde hair away from her face. "Are you all right?" She nodded with her usual brave little smile. I remembered what the doctor taught me. Adrian had watched the entire moment without saying a word. Later that evening, after Lily had fallen asleep in the employee daycare room while waiting for my shift to end, he asked if we could speak privately. We sat in the quiet library where the fireplace filled the room with gentle warmth. Adrian stared into the flames before finally speaking. "The specialist sent me a report today." I looked up. "About Lily?" He nodded. He said something that I have not been able to stop thinking about. I waited patiently. He told me that if Lily had suffered a serious asthma attack on the afternoon she gave me her inhaler, she would have had nothing to help her until emergency responders arrived. My chest tightened as old fear returned all at once. I had tried not to imagine that possibility because it hurt too much. Adrian continued quietly. I asked how serious that risk was. He paused, his voice noticeably softer than usual. The doctor answered, "Every minute matters for a child with asthma." Silence settled between us. The crackling fireplace suddenly sounded impossibly loud. Adrian slowly rubbed one hand across his face before looking at me again. I believed your daughter had shared something valuable. His gray eyes carried an emotion I had never seen in them before. I did not realize she had trusted me with the very thing that protected her own life. Tears gathered in my eyes before I could stop them. "She never thought about herself," I whispered. "She only saw someone who needed help." Adrian lowered his head for several seconds. When he finally spoke again, each word carried quiet conviction. "Grace, people have called me successful for many years. They have admired my influence, my business, and everything I have built. Yet a 3-year-old little girl showed more courage in one simple decision than I have witnessed in countless adults." He looked toward the hallway where Lily slept peacefully beyond the open door. "From this day forward," he said softly, "I will make certain that her kindness is never rewarded with hardship again, because a heart willing to give away its own breath deserves a world that protects every one of hers." 1 year later, I sometimes stood at the front entrance of the estate before starting work and wondered how one ordinary afternoon had quietly rewritten 3 lives. Lily was stronger now. Her asthma was carefully managed by specialists who treated her like family instead of another appointment on a crowded schedule. She still carried an inhaler wherever she went, but now she also carried confidence. She no longer looked afraid whenever she coughed. She knew exactly what to do, and so did every adult around her. The employee daycare had grown into a bright learning center with books, art supplies, air filtration systems, and a small medical room where children with chronic conditions could receive immediate care if needed. Adrian never placed his name on any plaque or wall. When people asked who had funded the improvements, the answer was always the same: someone who believes children deserve every chance to grow. Spring arrived with warm sunshine and flowering trees covering the estate grounds in soft shades of white and pink. On one Saturday morning, Adrian invited every employee and their families to a community celebration in the gardens. There were simple games, homemade desserts, music played by local students, and long picnic tables where executives, gardeners, cooks, and housekeepers all sat together without titles separating them. Watching everyone laugh side by side felt more extraordinary than the luxury surrounding us. Lily spent most of the afternoon running between flower beds with several new friends before returning to Adrian carrying a tiny dandelion she had picked herself. "This is for you," she announced proudly. Adrian accepted the fragile flower with exactly the same care he had shown the crayon drawing months before. "Another treasure," he said with a smile. "You keep everything I give you," Lily observed. "Because you only give important things," he answered. She thought about that for a moment before slipping her small hand into his. "Mommy says people become rich when they share." Adrian looked toward me across the garden. Our eyes met, and for the first time since we had met, I saw complete peace replacing the loneliness that had once lived behind his steady gray eyes. Later that afternoon, several reporters arrived to cover the opening of a new pediatric respiratory clinic built on the edge of the city. The building would provide affordable care for families who struggled to pay for asthma treatment and breathing disorders. During the ceremony, Adrian stood at the podium while cameras flashed around him. Everyone expected him to speak about the new facility, the investment, or the future of children's healthcare. Instead, he smiled quietly and said, "This clinic exists because one little girl taught me that compassion is measured by what we are willing to give when nobody is watching. The greatest lesson of my life did not come from a boardroom or a business deal. It came from a child who believed another person's next breath mattered more than her own comfort." Standing beside the audience, I felt tears fill my eyes as Lily reached up to squeeze my hand. She did not fully understand why so many adults were applauding. She only whispered, "Mommy, he is smiling again." I looked at Adrian as he stepped away from the podium and walked toward us, carrying the same quiet humility that had slowly transformed every corner of the world around him. I realized then that destiny had never been changed by wealth, influence, or power. It had been changed by a little white inhaler resting in the tiny hand of a little girl who believed every life was worth saving, proving that sometimes the smallest act of kindness becomes the breath that teaches even the strongest heart how to truly live.